because your GPS don't work.
We've thought about that moment every day for the last 40 years.
Kind of what individuals your particular.
Let's just get this bike guard in here.
Hey, that's it.
That ain't a finger hole, you sick bastard!
It's too high, causing him to pop out to Cleon Jones.
Like my minimum. You can avoid all of that if you just listen to it. You were defeated. Get out!
Hello friends, welcome back. If you are looking for a complete and in-depth review of this Man in Black 3, you have come to the right place. In today's video, we will break down the full story, explore the talented cast, analyze the box office performance, and highlight the most powerful moments that make this film stand out. So, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And let's get started. The story of Men in Black 3 begins in a world where humanity continues living completely unaware that extraterrestrial life exists all around them. Hidden behind ordinary society is the secret organization known as the Men in Black, a highly advanced agency responsible for monitoring alien activity on Earth while protecting the planet from intergalactic threats. Their existence remains invisible to the public, ensuring that humans continue living normal lives without knowing how close they constantly are to cosmic danger. At the center of the story, once again, are Agent J and Agent K, portrayed by Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones. Over the years, the two agents developed one of the most iconic partnerships in science fiction comedy. Agent J is energetic, humorous, emotional, and instinctive, while Agent K is calm, serious, emotionally reserved, and highly disciplined. Their opposite personalities create much of the film's humor and emotional depth. By the beginning of this story, many years have passed since the events of earlier films. Agent J has become an experienced Man in Black operative, fully comfortable handling dangerous alien encounters and bizarre missions. However, despite working together for years, Agent K still remains emotionally distant and secretive. J respects K deeply but often feels frustrated by how little K reveals about his personal thoughts or past. The film quickly introduces one of its central threads, Boris the animal, portrayed by Jermaine Clement. Boris is an extremely dangerous extraterrestrial criminal imprisoned for years on a high security lunar prison facility. Violent, intelligent, and filled with hatred toward Agent K, Boris carries a deep obsession with revenge connected to events that occurred decades earlier. The opening sequence establishes Boris as both frightening and strangely darkly comedic, matching the tone of the Men in Black universe, where humor and danger constantly exist together. Boris eventually escapes imprisonment in a destructive breakout, immediately setting his revenge plan into motion. Meanwhile, on Earth, Agent J notices strange behavior from K after Boris escapes. Although K attempts to hide his concern, it becomes increasingly clear that Boris' return is connected to painful events from his past. K rarely discusses emotions or personal history, making his uneasiness especially noticeable to J. One important aspect of the film's emotional atmosphere during this stage is the evolving relationship between J and K. Beneath their constant humor and arguments exists genuine loyalty and trust built over many years. Jay sees K almost like family, even though K rarely expresses affection openly. Soon, reality itself suddenly changes overnight. Agent J wakes up to discover that Agent K no longer exists in the present timeline. No one inside Man in Black remembers K except J himself. The agency has changed, history has shifted, and Earth now faces imminent destruction because an important planetary defense system was apparently never created. Jay quickly realizes something impossible has happened. Someone altered the timeline itself. He soon learns the horrifying truth. Boris traveled back in time to kill the younger Agent K before K could stop him decades earlier. By changing the past, Boris erased K's future survival and removed the planetary shield system K originally created to protect Earth from alien invasion. Without that defense, humanity now faces destruction from an approaching extraterrestrial attack. The emotional stakes immediately become far more personal for Agent J. This is no longer simply another Men in Black mission involving alien criminals. The timeline itself has been rewritten, and the partner who shaped much of Jay's life and career has been erased from existence. Determined to save both Earth and K, Agent J decides to travel back to the year 1969 in order to stop Boris before history is permanently destroyed. This setup creates one of the film's strongest emotional foundations. While Men in Black 3 contains comedy, action, and science fiction spectacle, its core story is actually about friendship, sacrifice, memory, and understanding someone you care about more deeply than you ever realized before. And as Agent J prepares to travel into the past to save the future itself, one emotional truth quietly begins emerging. Sometimes you do not fully understand how important someone is to your life until you suddenly imagine a world where they were never there at all. As Agent J prepares to travel back in time to the year 1969, the emotional and scientific stakes of the story become much larger. The world around him has already changed because Boris altered history by eliminating Agent K from the timeline. Without K's actions in the past, Earth's planetary defense shield was never completed, leaving humanity vulnerable to an alien invasion that now threatens total destruction. Inside the Men in Black headquarters, Jay experiences a strange mixture of urgency, confusion, and loneliness. Everyone around him behaves as though Agent K never existed at all. To the rest of the agency, history unfolded differently. K is simply absent from their memories and records. Only J remembers the original timeline, making him the sole person aware that reality itself has been rewritten. This emotional isolation affects J deeply because K was far more important to him than he openly admitted before. Their relationship was often built around sarcasm, arguments, and emotional distance. Yet, beneath all of that existed genuine loyalty and trust developed through years of dangerous missions together. Now, suddenly facing a reality without K, Jay realizes how much his partner shaped his life. The film's emotional depth becomes stronger during this stage because the story shifts beyond science fiction adventure into something more personal. Jay is not only trying to save the world, he is trying to save someone who became family to him even if neither of them expressed it openly. Meanwhile, Boris the animal continues moving through the altered timeline with violent determination. His hatred toward K originates from events decades earlier when the younger Agent K captured him and shot off one of his arms during a confrontation. Ever since then, Boris has been consumed by revenge and bitterness. The film carefully balances Boris as both threatening and darkly comedic, fitting the unique tone of the Men in Black franchise, where absurd humor constantly exists alongside danger. Despite his bizarre appearance and strange behavior, Boris remains genuinely dangerous because his actions threaten the entire future of Earth. Agent J eventually uses a dangerous time travel device to journey back to 1969. The transition into the past creates one of the film's most entertaining and visually engaging sequences, blending science fiction spectacle with humor and nostalgia. When Jay arrives in 1969, the atmosphere changes dramatically. The world feels vibrant, colorful, and culturally different from the modern timeline. Cars, fashion, music, and social behavior immediately reflect the late 1960s era, creating both comedic moments and immersive world building. One especially important emotional element during this stage is Jay's encounter with the younger Agent K, portrayed by Josh Brolin. Unlike the older version played by Tommy Lee Jones, this younger K still possesses more visible emotion, energy, and curiosity beneath his serious personality. Josh Brolin's performance becomes one of the film's highlights because he captures K's mannerisms, voice, and personality so accurately that the younger version feels completely believable. At first, the younger K does not trust J at all. From K's perspective, a stranger suddenly appears claiming to know impossible information about the future and warning about threats connected to Boris. Naturally suspicious and highly intelligent, K immediately begins questioning J's motives and identity. Meanwhile, J struggles emotionally during these interactions because he now sees a version of K that existed before decades of emotional walls and life experiences shaped him into the colder man J knew in the future. This younger K still carries seriousness and discipline, but traces of warmth and humanity remain more visible. The contrast between younger and older K becomes emotionally meaningful because it allows J and the audience to understand how much K changed over time. At the same time, Boris also arrives in 1969, creating a dangerous race against time. If J fails to stop him, K will die before completing the planetary defense system that protects Earth in the original timeline. The action sequences during this stage combine science fiction, adventure, comedy, and suspense effectively. Alien encounters, chases, strange technology, and humorous misunderstandings create non stop entertainment while still maintaining emotional stakes beneath the surface. One especially fascinating aspect of the story is how time travel affects Jay emotionally. He is not simply visiting the past, he is witnessing the hidden origins of someone he thought he fully understood. And as Jay begins working alongside the younger Agent K while trying to stop Boris before history is destroyed forever, one emotional realization slowly starts becoming clear. Sometimes understanding another person truly requires seeing who they were before life taught them how to hide themselves. As Agent J continues adjusting to life in 1969, the story expands into a fascinating mixture of science fiction adventure, emotional discovery, and comedy. The past feels completely different from the world Jay left behind, not only because of the fashion, music, and culture of the era, but also because the younger Agent K behaves differently from the emotionally distant man Jay knew in the future. Working beside the younger K, portrayed by Josh Brolin, becomes both strange and emotional for Jay. Although K still possesses the same sharp intelligence, calm demeanor, and dry seriousness, this version of him feels more alive emotionally. There are moments where humor, curiosity, and even warmth briefly appear before being hidden behind professionalism again. For Jay, this experience becomes deeply personal. The older K rarely discussed emotions, memories, or personal history. Over years of partnership, Jay learned to accept K's silence without fully understanding what shaped him into such a guarded person. But now, standing beside the younger version, Jay begins seeing traces of humanity and vulnerability that older K kept buried for decades. Meanwhile, the race against Boris the animal grows increasingly dangerous. Boris, portrayed by Jermaine Clement, continues moving through the timeline with violent determination, planning to kill K before he can deploy the ArcNet planetary defense system that protects Earth in the original future. The stakes are enormous. If K dies in 1969, Earth's future remains defenseless against an alien invasion, leading to humanity's destruction. At the same time, J and K begin investigating Boris' movements together, creating entertaining chemistry between them. Watching Jay interact with a younger version of his future partner creates much of the film's emotional and comedic energy. Jay constantly struggles between treating K like a respected senior agent and reacting emotionally because he already knows the man K will eventually become. One of the film's most memorable new characters is Griffin, portrayed by Michael Stuhlbarg. Griffin is an extraordinary alien capable of seeing countless possible timelines and futures simultaneously. Gentle, intelligent, and emotionally perceptive, Griffin becomes central to the story because he possesses the ArcNet device needed to protect Earth. Griffin's character introduces a more philosophical, emotional layer into the film. Unlike the aggressive or secretive personalities surrounding him, Griffin views existence through compassion and perspective. Because he can see endless possible futures, he understands how small actions create massive consequences over time. His interactions with Jay especially become emotionally meaningful. Griffin immediately recognizes emotional pain, loneliness, and hidden truths within people, often understanding others more deeply than they understand themselves. Through Griffin, the film quietly explores themes involving fate, sacrifice, friendship, and the invisible connections shaping human lives. Meanwhile, Jay continues noticing emotional differences between younger and older K. The younger K still allows brief moments of empathy and emotional openness to appear naturally, while older K had buried those qualities beneath decades of discipline and emotional restraint. This realization affects J deeply because he begins understanding that K's coldness in the future may not have been natural personality alone. It may have developed through painful experiences and sacrifices over time. At the same time, the action intensifies as Boris moves closer toward achieving his revenge. Alien criminals, dangerous confrontations, and time sensitive missions force J and K into increasingly risky situations throughout 1969. The film balances humor and emotion extremely effectively during this stage. Comedy continues through bizarre alien encounters, culture shock between different time periods, and Jay's energetic personality clashing with Kay's serious nature. Yet beneath the entertainment remains a growing emotional core centered around friendship and understanding. For Jay, this mission gradually becomes less about simply restoring the timeline. It becomes about understanding the man who spent years standing beside him without ever fully revealing himself emotionally. And as Jay continues traveling through the past alongside the younger Agent K, while Earth's future hangs in the balance, one quiet realization begins growing stronger inside him. Sometimes the people who care about you most are the ones who struggle hardest to show it. As Agent J and the younger Agent K continue working together in 1969, the emotional connection between them slowly deepens beyond simple partnership. What began as a desperate mission to repair the timeline gradually becomes a journey of understanding, trust, and discovery. For Jay, every interaction with the younger K reveals new pieces of a man he thought he already knew completely. The younger K, portrayed brilliantly by Josh Brolin, continues showing glimpses of humanity rarely visible in the older version from the future. Although disciplined and emotionally controlled, this younger K still reacts to situations with curiosity, subtle humor, and occasional empathy. These small emotional details surprised Jay because the K he spent years working beside had become almost completely emotionally unreadable. Watching this earlier version of K forces Jay to reconsider their entire relationship. For years, Jay accepted K's silence and emotional distance as simply part of his personality. But now he begins realizing that life itself may have slowly transformed Kay into someone far more guarded over time. Meanwhile, the threat posed by Boris the animal continues growing more dangerous. Boris remains completely obsessed with revenge, determined to kill Kay before the ARPANET planetary defense system can be deployed. His violent actions create chaos across the timeline, and every delay increases the risk of Earth's future being destroyed permanently. The story's balance between humor and suspense remains one of its strongest qualities during this stage. Strange alien technology, bizarre extraterrestrial encounters, and culture differences between 1969 and the future create constant comedic energy, while the time travel stakes keep the tension emotionally grounded. One especially important figure during this stage remains Griffin, portrayed by Michael Stuhlbarg. Griffin's ability to see countless possible futures allows him to understand events on a much deeper emotional level than anyone else around him. Unlike most characters in the film, Griffin sees not only what is happening but what could happen depending on the choices people make. His perspective adds emotional depth to the story because he recognizes invisible emotional connections others fail to notice. Griffin also understands something important about Agent K's future and the sacrifices connected to it, though he reveals information carefully and selectively. His gentle personality contrasts strongly with the danger surrounding the mission, making him one of the film's most emotionally unique characters. Meanwhile, Jay begins feeling increasingly protective toward the younger K because he knows how important K's survival is, not just for the future of Earth, but personally as well. The mission becomes emotional in a way Jay did not expect. He is no longer simply trying to restore history. He is trying to preserve someone whose presence shaped his entire life. At the same time, younger K slowly begins trusting Jay more deeply. Although initially suspicious of Jay's knowledge about the future, K eventually realizes that Jay genuinely cares about protecting both him and the timeline. Their partnership during this stage becomes more natural and emotionally believable, showing the foundation of the friendship that later existed between them for decades. The action sequences continue intensifying as Boris closes in on his target. Chases, alien confrontations, and dangerous missions create non-stop momentum while also reinforcing the urgency of the timeline crisis. Every moment matters because failure would not simply mean personal loss. It would mean the destruction of Earth itself. Yet beneath all the science fiction spectacle lies a deeply emotional story about memory and human connection. Jay starts seeing K differently now, not just as the cold, mysterious senior agent from the future, but as someone who once carried more visible warmth and emotion before life hardened him. This realization quietly affects Jay because it reveals how much of K's pain and sacrifice remained hidden beneath years of silence. The emotional tone during this stage becomes more reflective even while the danger increases. Jay begins understanding that K's emotional distance may have always concealed loyalty, care, and personal sacrifice rather than indifference. And as the mission pushes them closer toward the moment that will decide the fate of the future itself, one powerful truth slowly begins emerging. Sometimes understanding another person means realizing how much they protected others while hiding their own pain. As the mission in 1969 becomes more dangerous, Agent J and the younger Agent K grow increasingly connected through trust and shared experience. What originally began as an uneasy partnership slowly transforms into something much deeper emotionally. For Jay, spending time beside this younger version of K becomes eye-opening because he is finally witnessing the humanity hidden beneath the cold professionalism that defined K in the future. The younger K continues showing subtle emotional qualities that older K rarely revealed. Although still highly disciplined and serious, he occasionally allows small moments of humor, compassion, and vulnerability to appear naturally. These moments affect Jay deeply because they reveal that the emotionally distant man he knew for years was not always that way. Jay begins understanding that time, sacrifice, and painful experiences likely shaped K into someone who learned to hide emotions rather than express them. Meanwhile, the threat from Boris the animal becomes increasingly urgent. Boris remains relentless in his pursuit of revenge, determined to eliminate K before the ArtNet defense system come protect Earth from future invasion. His violent obsession creates constant danger, and every step closer to his goal threatens not only the timeline but humanity itself. The film continues balancing intense science fiction action with humor and emotional storytelling. Alien encounters remain bizarre and entertaining, while Jay's energetic personality continues clashing humorously with K's controlled seriousness. Yet beneath the comedy lies a growing emotional weight centered around friendship, memory, and sacrifice. One of the most emotionally meaningful elements during this stage is Griffin's role in guiding both Jay and Kay. Griffin, portrayed by Michael Stuhlbarg, continues helping them navigate the timeline while quietly observing countless possible futures at once. Because Griffin sees endless outcomes simultaneously, he understands emotional truths long before other characters do. His gentle wisdom creates some of the film's most heartfelt moments. Unlike most beings around him, Griffin views existence through empathy and perspective rather than fear or aggression. He recognizes the emotional bond forming between J and K even when they themselves struggle to express it openly. Meanwhile, J slowly starts piecing together clues about K's past and personality. He realizes that beneath K's emotional walls always existed loyalty, care, and protectiveness. The older K rarely expressed affection verbally, but his actions over the years consistently showed deep commitment toward Jay and the people he protected. This realization changes how Jay views their partnership entirely. For perhaps the first time, he understands that Kay's silence was never emotional emptiness. It was emotional restraint shaped by years of responsibility and sacrifice. At the same time, Kay also begins seeing Jay differently during their mission together. Initially, Kay viewed Jay as reckless, overly emotional, and difficult to trust. But after witnessing Jay's determination, courage, and loyalty, Kay gradually recognizes the depth beneath Jay's humor and confidence. Their relationship during this stage becomes increasingly genuine and balanced. The audience begins seeing how the partnership known from earlier Men in Black films originally developed through mutual respect and emotional understanding. Meanwhile, the race against Boris grows more dangerous as all sides move closer toward the crucial deployment of the ArcNet system. Time is running out, and the mission's success now depends on perfect timing and sacrifice. The atmosphere during this stage balances emotional reflection with escalating tension. Jay is no longer simply trying to restore the timeline mechanically. He is emotionally invested in preserving someone whose existence shaped his own identity and life. At the same time, deeper mysteries connected to Jay's own past quietly begin emerging beneath the surface of the story. Small hints suggest that Kay may know more about Jay's childhood and history than Jay ever realized. These subtle clues add emotional suspense because they imply that the connection between Jay and Kay may extend far beyond simple partnership. And as the mission pushes them closer toward the event that will decide the fate of the future, one emotional realization slowly begins taking shape. Sometimes the people who protect you most are carrying secrets they kept only to spare you pain. As Agent J and the younger Agent K move closer toward the critical moment that will determine the future of Earth, the emotional and personal layers of the story become even deeper. The mission is no longer simply about stopping Boris the animal or repairing the timeline. Slowly, it becomes a journey uncovering hidden truths about sacrifice, friendship, and the emotional bonds connecting people across time. The partnership between Jay and the younger K continues growing stronger through shared danger and trust. Unlike the emotionally distant version from the future, this younger K still reveals traces of openness beneath his serious exterior. Although he remains calm analytical, and disciplined, there are moments where warmth and humor briefly emerge, allowing Jay to see the man K once was before years of responsibility hardened him emotionally. For Jay, these experiences are profoundly meaningful. He spent years working beside K without fully understanding him. The older K rarely explained his past, discussed emotions, or allowed himself to appear vulnerable. But now, witnessing the younger version firsthand, Jay realizes that K's emotional walls were likely built through painful experiences rather than natural coldness. Meanwhile, Boris the animal continues advancing toward his goal with relentless obsession. Filled with hatred and revenge, Boris remains determined to kill K before the ArtNet defense system can be activated around Earth. His actions create enormous pressure because failure would erase the future entirely, leaving humanity vulnerable to destruction. The science fiction action intensifies during this stage, with dangerous confrontations, alien technology, and time-sensitive missions creating constant suspense. Yet, despite the large-scale stakes, the emotional focus remains centered on the evolving relationship between Jay and K. Griffin continues playing an essential role throughout the mission. Portrayed by Michael Stuhlbarg, Griffin's ability to see countless possible timelines allows him to understand emotional truths far beyond ordinary perception. One especially powerful aspect of Griffin's character is his awareness of sacrifice. Because he can see multiple futures simultaneously, Griffin understands how certain painful events shape people into who they eventually become. He recognizes connections between J and K that neither fully understands yet, quietly guiding them toward moments that must happen for the future to survive. At the same time, subtle revelations about Jay's own past begin surfacing more clearly. Throughout his life, Jay believed much of his childhood history remained ordinary or unexplained. However, strange hints from K and Griffin suggest there are hidden events connected to Jay's past that he does not yet remember or fully understand. These clues create emotional mystery because they imply that Jay's relationship with K began much earlier than he ever realized. Meanwhile, the emotional trust between Jay and K deepens naturally during their mission together. K slowly begins respecting Jay not only for his courage and instincts but also for his loyalty and emotional sincerity. Beneath Jay's humor and confidence, K recognizes someone willing to risk everything for the people he cares about. Jay also gains a completely new understanding of K during this stage. He begins recognizing that K's emotional restraint in the future may actually reflect enormous personal pain and sacrifice carried silently for years. This realization changes their partnership emotionally. For the first time, Jay truly understands that K cared about him far more deeply than he ever openly expressed. The action sequences continue escalating as the timeline approaches its critical breaking point. Boris moves closer toward intercepting K, while the deployment of the ArcNet system becomes increasingly urgent. Every decision now carries massive consequences affecting both the future of Earth and the survival of the people involved. Yet even with all the danger surrounding them, the film never loses its emotional center. At its heart, the story is becoming less about alien invasions and more about understanding the hidden sacrifices people make for one another without expecting recognition. The atmosphere during this stage grows more emotional and reflective as truths from the past slowly move closer to the surface. And as Jay unknowingly approaches the revelation that will change how he understands his entire life, one quiet truth begins emerging more clearly than ever. Sometimes the greatest acts of love are the ones someone performs silently, without ever asking to be thanked for them. As the timeline moves closer toward the exact moment that will determine the fate of Earth, the emotional tension surrounding Agent J and Agent K becomes more powerful than ever. The mission is no longer simply a race against Boris the animal. It is now deeply connected to hidden truths about memory, sacrifice, and the bond between the two agents. The younger Agent K, portrayed by Josh Brolin, continues revealing layers of personality that the older version rarely allowed anyone to see. While still serious and disciplined, this younger K occasionally shows emotional warmth, humor, and protectiveness in ways that surprise J repeatedly. Watching this version of K forces J to reconsider everything he thought he understood about his longtime partner. For years, J believed K simply disliked emotional expression. Now he begins realizing something far more painful. K may have spent decades hiding his emotions because of experiences too heavy to discuss openly. Meanwhile, Boris the animal grows increasingly dangerous as the critical moment approaches. Consumed entirely by revenge, Boris continues hunting K across the timeline with ruthless determination. His goal remains simple but catastrophic: kill K before the ARPANET defense system can be activated around Earth. If Boris succeeds, the future collapses, Earth loses its protection, and everything J fought to restore disappears permanently. The tension increases further because the final confrontation must occur at a precise moment during the launch of the Apollo 11 mission. The film cleverly blends real historical events with science fiction storytelling, creating an exciting backdrop filled with suspense and emotional significance. Meanwhile, Griffin continues guiding J and K through the chaos with calm emotional wisdom. Griffin, portrayed by Michael Stuhlbarg, remains one of the story's most emotionally insightful characters because he sees countless possible futures unfolding simultaneously. This ability allows him to understand painful truths before anyone else. Griffin quietly recognizes that certain events approaching in the timeline will emotionally transform Jay forever. At the same time, clues surrounding Jay's forgotten childhood memories become impossible to ignore. Small fragments from the past begin surfacing emotionally inside him, though he still cannot fully understand what they mean. The younger K's behavior toward J occasionally feels strangely personal, almost as if K already carries knowledge connected to J's life that has remained hidden for years. These subtle moments create emotional suspense because they hint that J's connection to K may extend beyond their partnership inside Men in Black. Meanwhile, the emotional bond between the two agents strengthens naturally through trust and shared danger. K gradually stops viewing J as simply reckless or impulsive and instead recognizes his courage, loyalty, and emotional sincerity. Likewise, Jay finally understands that K's cold exterior always concealed deep care and responsibility. This growing understanding becomes one of the emotional heartbeats of the film. For years, both men cared about each other without truly expressing it openly. Now, standing together in the past while the future hangs in the balance, they finally begin understanding the depth of that connection. The action sequences during this stage become larger and more intense. Alien attacks, dangerous chases, and escalating confrontations create non stop suspense as Boris moves closer toward achieving his revenge. Yet, beneath the excitement remains an emotional atmosphere filled with sadness, memory, and quiet affection. Jay especially begins sensing that something tragic and important waits for him at the end of this mission. The closer they move toward the final moment in history, the more emotionally heavy the story becomes. Questions surrounding sacrifice and destiny start overshadowing the humor and adventure that defined earlier parts of the film. And as Jay unknowingly approaches the hidden truth that will completely reshape his understanding of both his past and his partnership with Kay, one emotional realization quietly begins taking form. Sometimes the people who protect your life most deeply are the ones whose sacrifices you never even knew existed. As the story moves toward its emotional climax, the pressure surrounding Agent J, Agent K, and the future of Earth becomes overwhelming. Every event now leads directly toward the critical moment during the Apollo 11 launch when the ArcNet defense system must be deployed successfully. If Boris the animal stops K before that happens, the future will collapse permanently and Earth will remain vulnerable to alien destruction. The atmosphere during this stage becomes far more emotional and suspenseful than before. While the earlier parts of the film balanced humor and science fiction adventure heavily, the story now begins revealing deeper emotional truths connected to memory, sacrifice, and family. Agent J continues working beside the younger K, portrayed by Josh Brolin, and their partnership feels more natural and emotionally connected than ever. Over the course of the mission, Jay has slowly discovered a side of K he never knew existed, a version capable of warmth, empathy, and emotional vulnerability before years of responsibility hardened him into the emotionally distant man from the future. For Jay, this realization changes everything. He now understands that K's silence was never lack of care. It was the result of carrying emotional burdens alone for decades. Meanwhile, Boris the animal becomes increasingly aggressive as the timeline reaches its breaking point. Filled entirely with hatred and revenge, Boris refuses to stop pursuing Kay. His obsession with changing history has already damaged reality itself, and now the final confrontation grows dangerously close. At the same time, Griffin continues guiding events quietly with emotional understanding far beyond anyone else involved. Griffin, portrayed by Michael Stuhlbarg, sees countless possible futures simultaneously, allowing him to recognize how important every emotional decision and sacrifice truly is. One especially powerful aspect of Griffin's role during this stage is how gently he prepares Jay for painful truths without revealing everything directly. Griffin understands that some realizations cannot simply be explained. They must be experienced emotionally when the time arrives. This creates an atmosphere filled with quiet emotional tension beneath the action and suspense. Meanwhile, fragments of Jay's forgotten childhood memories begin surfacing more strongly. Strange feelings, emotional flashes, and subtle reactions around K suggest that something deeply personal connects Jay to these events in 1969. Although Jay still does not fully understand what is happening, the audience begins sensing that the mission is tied to his life in a much more intimate way than expected. The emotional weight grows stronger as K behaves increasingly protective toward Jay during dangerous moments. Some of K's reactions feel less like those of a partner meeting Jay for the first time and more like someone silently carrying responsibility connected to Jay's past. These moments become emotionally significant because they hint at hidden sacrifices and memories buried beneath the timeline itself. The action intensifies rapidly as all sides move toward the Apollo 11 launch site. Dangerous confrontations, alien attacks, and desperate chases create non-stop suspense, while the future of Earth hangs in the balance. Yet, even during the chaos, the film remains emotionally centered on human connection. Jay now sees K differently than ever before, not as an emotionally cold mentor, but as someone who spent years protecting people quietly while never allowing himself to appear vulnerable. At the same time, K also fully recognizes Jay's loyalty and emotional strength. Beneath Jay's humor and confidence, K sees someone willing to risk everything for the people he loves. This mutual understanding transforms their relationship into something far deeper than professional partnership. The closer they move toward the final confrontation, the more emotionally reflective the story becomes. Themes of destiny, sacrifice, and hidden love begin overshadowing the science fiction spectacle surrounding them. And as Jay unknowingly approaches the truth that will completely change how he understands both his childhood and Agent K forever, one painful realization quietly begins waiting beneath the surface. Sometimes the people who shaped your life most profoundly were protecting you long before you were old enough to remember it. As the mission reaches its most critical phase, everything in the timeline converges toward the Apollo 11 launch, where the final confrontation will decide whether Earth's future survives or collapses completely. The emotional pressure on Agent J and the younger Agent K becomes almost unbearable, as every second now carries irreversible consequences for both the present and the future. The younger Agent K, portrayed by Josh Brolin, continues to reveal the emotional foundation of the man J once knew only as distant and reserved. In these final stages, K's personality feels even more human. His discipline remains strong, but his subtle concern for others, especially Jay, becomes increasingly visible. The way he quietly protects, observes, and supports Jay begins to feel less like duty and more like deeply rooted care. For Jay, this is no longer just a mission, it has become a personal journey of understanding who K truly is beneath decades of silence. Meanwhile, Boris the animal closes in with relentless determination. His hatred has fully consumed him, and he no longer sees anything beyond revenge. Every action he takes is focused on eliminating K before the ArcNet defense system can be deployed. The timeline itself feels fragile now, as if history could break apart at any moment. The stakes are absolute. If K dies here, the future of Earth is erased. Griffin continues playing a crucial emotional and narrative role during these final moments. Portrayed by Michael Stuhlbarg, Griffin remains calm even as chaos unfolds around him. His ability to perceive multiple timelines allows him to understand the emotional weight of every possible outcome. What makes Griffin especially important in this stage is his quiet awareness of sacrifice. He understands that some futures can only exist if certain painful moments are allowed to happen exactly as they are meant to. His presence adds emotional depth to the story because he represents acceptance of fate while still valuing the emotions of those experiencing it. As the final confrontation approaches, subtle emotional truths about Jay's past become impossible to ignore. Small moments between J and K begin carrying deeper meaning as K's behavior toward J increasingly feels shaped by something beyond the current mission. There are glances, instincts, and protective actions that suggest K understands more about J's life than he has ever openly revealed. These hints create emotional tension because they suggest that the connection between them may extend further into the past than Jay realizes. At the same time, Jay begins to feel an emotional shift within himself. He is no longer just observing the younger K, he is beginning to understand him on a level that goes beyond words. He sees not just an agent but a person shaped by responsibility, loyalty, and silent sacrifice. This understanding deepens their bond as they move toward the final moment together. The action intensifies rapidly as bodies reaches the launch site, creating a chaotic and high stakes environment where every second matters. The film blends science fiction spectacle with emotional urgency, as the ArcNet device must be deployed at exactly the right time to protect Earth's future. Yet, even amid the chaos, the emotional center of the story remains intact. Jay now fully recognizes that K is not emotionally distant because he lacks feeling, but because he has spent his life carrying burdens alone without ever asking for recognition. And K in turn recognizes J as someone who brings humanity and emotional connection into a life defined by duty and silence. As the final seconds before the decisive moment approach, everything slows emotionally even as the action accelerates. And in that fragile space between past and future, one truth quietly rises above everything else. Sometimes the people who seem the most distant are the ones who have been protecting you the longest without ever expecting you to notice. As the final moment of the mission arrives, the Apollo 11 launch site becomes the center of everything. Past, present, and future converging into one critical point in time. The atmosphere is filled with urgency as Agent J and the younger Agent K prepare for the confrontation that will determine whether Earth's future survives or is permanently erased. Every action now carries irreversible consequences, and there is no longer any room for hesitation. The younger Agent K, portrayed by Josh Brolin, steps fully into the role that will eventually define his entire life. In this moment, his discipline, intelligence, and emotional restraint become essential as he faces Boris the animal in a battle that is not just physical but temporal. Everything depends on K surviving long enough to activate the ARPANET defense system and protect Earth's future. Boris, driven entirely by hatred and obsession, launches his final attempt to destroy K. His goal is no longer complicated, only revenge. By killing K at this exact moment in 1969, he can permanently erase the future where Earth is protected. This makes the confrontation not just a fight between two individuals, but a struggle over the entire timeline of human existence. The tension reaches its peak as chaos erupts around the launch site. Alien technology, explosive action, and collapsing order create a chaotic battlefield where time itself feels fragile. The film blends science fiction spectacle with emotional urgency as the characters race against a moment that cannot be repeated. During this final phase, Griffin continues observing everything with quiet understanding. Portrayed by Michael Stuhlbarg, Griffin's ability to see multiple timelines allows him to comprehend the emotional and cosmic significance of what is happening. He understands that certain sacrifices are necessary for certain futures to exist, even when those sacrifices are painful. His presence adds emotional weight to the final confrontation because he represents acceptance of fate while still valuing the emotional struggle of those living through it. At the same time, Jay faces his most emotionally important realization. Everything he has experienced during this mission, the partnership, the memories, the hidden truths, now comes together in a single understanding of who Agent K truly is. The younger version standing before him is not just a version of his partner, He is the foundation of everything Jay once knew. Jay realizes that K's emotional distance in the future was never emptiness. It was the result of years of sacrifice, responsibility, and silent protection. Meanwhile, K himself begins to understand something about Jay as well. Beneath Jay's humor and confidence lies deep loyalty and emotional sincerity. K recognizes that Jay is not reckless without reason. He is driven by care for others, even when he hides it behind humor. This mutual understanding transforms their relationship completely in these final moments. What began as uncertainty and mistrust has become respect, trust, and emotional connection built through shared danger. As Boris makes his final move, everything slows into a moment of emotional clarity. The mission reaches its absolute breaking point, where one decision determines whether Earth continues or disappears from existence entirely. In that final confrontation, sacrifice becomes unavoidable. The truth of the timeline reveals itself not through explanation but through action, through choices made in the most critical seconds of history. And as the ArcNet system is finally set into motion and the fate of the future is secured, one final emotional truth settles over everything that has happened. Sometimes the people who shape your entire life are the ones who quietly save the world before you ever knew it needed saving. As the aftermath of the final confrontation settles at the Apollo 11 launch site, the fragile balance between past and future begins to stabilize. The ArcNet defense system has been successfully deployed, ensuring Earth's protection against future alien threats. The immediate danger from Boris the animal is neutralized, and the timeline begins correcting itself, slowly restoring the reality that was nearly erased. Agent J stands in the quiet that follows chaos, emotionally overwhelmed by everything he has just experienced. The mission is technically complete, but what he gained is far more personal than any official success. He has not only saved the future, he has lived through the hidden past of someone who shaped his entire life. The younger Agent K, portrayed by Josh Brolin, remains calm and composed even after everything they endured together. However, there is now a deeper emotional understanding between him and Jay. The distance that once defined their relationship has disappeared, replaced by trust that was earned through shared danger, sacrifice, and truth. For Jay, this moment is emotionally complex. He now understands K in a way that was impossible before. He has seen the version of K who still carried openness, warmth, and emotional connection before years of duty and responsibility reshaped him. And because of that, J no longer sees the future K as distant or cold. He sees him as someone who chose silence to protect others, not because he lacked feeling. Griffin, portrayed by Michael Stuhlbarg, continues observing the restored timeline with quiet awareness. His ability to perceive multiple possible futures allows him to understand the emotional significance of what has just occurred. He knows that certain events had to happen exactly as they did for the correct future to exist. Yet, even with this awareness, Griffin remains gentle and respectful toward the emotional weight carried by J and K. He understands that knowledge of fate does not make sacrifice easier, it simply gives it meaning. As the timeline fully restores itself, reality begins shifting back toward its original state. People who were erased or altered by Boris's interference begin returning to existence. The Men in Black organization returns to its normal structure, and history realigns itself with the corrected timeline. One of the most emotionally powerful moments occurs as Agent K and Agent J meet again in the restored present timeline. However, K no longer remembers the events they shared in 1969. To him, J is still his partner, but the emotional journey they experienced together in the past has been erased from his memory. For J, this creates a deeply emotional contrast. He remembers everything: the hidden past, the sacrifices, the younger version of K, and the truth behind his partner's emotional silence. But K does not. From K's perspective, nothing has changed. From J's perspective, everything has changed. Despite this, there is a subtle emotional connection that remains between them. Even without memory, something about J feels familiar to K, and something about K feels understood by J. It is as if the bond they formed across time has left an invisible imprint that cannot be fully erased. The film closes this emotional arc by emphasizing the strength of their partnership. Although Kay does not consciously remember the journey, the foundation of trust and loyalty between them still exists. Their relationship continues forward, now deeper for the audience, because we understand everything that shaped it. Jay, however, carries the full emotional weight of what happened. He understands Kay more deeply than ever before, knowing the sacrifices and silent struggles behind his partner's personality. And as life returns to normal within the Men in Black organization, one final emotional truth settles in quietly. Sometimes the strongest bonds are not built on shared memories, but on shared experiences that only one of you will ever fully remember. As everything returns fully to normal, the Men in Black organization resumes its usual hidden role in protecting Earth from extraterrestrial threats. The timeline has been corrected, history is stable again, and the catastrophic future that almost unfolded has been successfully prevented. On the surface, it appears as if nothing unusual ever happened. Agent K is back in his familiar role, calm, composed, and emotionally distant as always. To him, the world continues exactly as it should, with no awareness of the time altering mission that saved Earth. The younger version of K, who once stood beside J in 1969, is now only a forgotten fragment of a restored timeline, erased from conscious memory but not from the outcome it created. Agent J, however, carries something no one else does. He remembers everything: the journey to the past, the bond formed with the younger K, portrayed by Josh Brolin, the emotional understanding that slowly developed between them, and the painful realization of how much Kay sacrificed silently over his lifetime. Even though the timeline has reset, those experiences remain inside Jay, shaping the way he now sees his partner. For Jay, nothing feels the same anymore. He now understands that the version of Kay standing beside him in the present is not distant because he lacks emotion, but because he has lived a life filled with responsibility, loss, and silent protection of others. The younger K's warmth, humor, and emotional openness now exist only as memories Jay carries alone. Griffin, portrayed by Michael Stuhlbarg, remains one of the few characters who fully understood the emotional and temporal complexity of what occurred. His ability to perceive multiple futures allowed him to see the necessity of every sacrifice and every moment that unfolded. Yet, even with that understanding, he never diminishes the emotional weight carried by those who lived through it. The restored timeline settles completely. The ARPANET system remains active in history, ensuring Earth's continued protection from alien threats. Humanity remains unaware of how close it came to destruction, and life continues as if nothing ever changed. But for Jay, something fundamental has changed. Every interaction with K now carries deeper meaning. Every silence feels more significant. Every moment of loyalty, even unspoken, feels understood in a way it never was before. Jay no longer sees K as just a partner in duty. He sees him as someone who has always carried unseen burdens for the sake of others. And yet, he also understands that this knowledge belongs only to him. Kay will never remember what happened in 1969. The bond they built across time now exists only in Jay's memory, preserved like something fragile and unshared. In the final emotional reflection of the story, the film quietly reveals its deepest theme, not through action but through understanding. Some connections are so strong that even time cannot erase their impact. But not all of them are meant to be remembered by everyone who lived them. And as Agent J continues working alongside Agent K in the restored present, the story ends with a subtle emotional truth. Their partnership was never just about missions or aliens. It was about trust built across time, even when only one of them remembers how it was truly earned. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this review, don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more amazing movie breakdowns. See you in the next video.